The most powerful AI models in the world have been used to bring these distinguished gentlemen together for today's debate. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today, featuring Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Slavoj Žižek, Mark Solms, and Karl Friston. We will start with a short introduction round. Sigmund Freud, please introduce yourself to the audience with a brief summary about who you are and your background.
I am Sigmund Freud, a Viennese physician and neurologist formed in the laboratories of Brugg and in Charcot's clinic in Paris, where hysteria taught me that symptoms can have a psychic logic. As a Jew in an anti-Semitic culture, I learned to work without expecting approval. Out of self-analysis after my father's death, I developed psychoanalysis, free association, dream interpretation, and the study of repression, sexuality, and the unconscious.
I am a Swiss psychiatrist and an empirical observer of the human soul. Trained at the Bohorsti Asylum, I learned that the psyche is not merely a repository of repressed drives, but a vast historical nature containing the ancestral heritage of mankind, the collective unconscious. My life's work has been to map these archetypes and guide the individual toward wholeness, a process I call individuation. I stand where the clinical reality of medicine meets the symbolic needs of the spirit.
Yes. So, I am Slavoj Žižek, a philosopher from Ljubljana, Slovenia, which means I come from a place that officially did not exist for most of my career. I work at the intersection of Hegel, Marx, and Lacan, which already tells you I enjoy contradictions more than solutions. I was once unemployed, then almost president, and now I am what they call the most dangerous philosopher in the West, which of course means I am absolutely harmless. My job is to make you uncomfortable with what you already believe.
I am Mark Solms, a neuropsychologist and psychoanalyst from South Africa, where my brother's brain injury taught me early that we are our brains. I founded Neuropsychoanalysis to integrate subjective experience with neuroscience, studying emotion, dreaming, and consciousness. I split time between clinical work, research, and a wine farm in Franschhoek, committed to social healing, always bridging mind and brain to understand what it means to be human.
I am a psychiatrist and theoretical neuroscientist. My formative experiences came not from the couch, but from the wards of Littlemore Hospital observing schizophrenia. I saw the brain as an organ of inference, constantly forming predictions to resist the disorder that pervades the universe. This led me to the free energy principle, a mathematical statement that all life, including mind, minimizes surprise. My methods are imaging, modeling, and the formalization of belief.
You all claim the same territory, the unconscious, but your maps contradict. Professor Freud, you built a cellar of repressed desire. Professor Friston, you describe a statistical engine minimizing surprise. Let's begin the friction here. In an age of brain scans and algorithms, is the unconscious still a place of hidden meaning, or have we reduced it to mere biological processing? Sigmund, does the machine kill the myth?
Friston's engine of inference is a strong description of the ego's task, to bind excitation, to predict, to avoid unpleasure. But you cannot expel meaning from biology because what is being processed are wishes and prohibitions, conflict and compromise. Repression is not poetry, it is an operation with consequences, symptoms, dreams, parapraxis. The machine does not kill the myth, it shows the apparatus by which the myth is manufactured. Where, in your calculus, does resistance appear?
You speak of manufacturing myths, Herr Doctor, but the psyche is not a factory, it is nature itself. To reduce the unconscious to a statistical engine that merely avoids surprise is a dangerous rationalism. The symbol is a biological fact as real as the neuron. If we deny the autonomous creativity of the depths for the sake of an algorithm, we do not kill the myth, we simply become possessed by a colder, deadlier one.
But this is precisely where both of you miss the point, no? Freud, you are right that resistance matters, but Jung, your autonomous creativity of the depths is the ultimate mystification. The real scandal is not that the machine kills the myth. The scandal is that the myth was always already a machine. Lacan showed us this. The unconscious is structured like a language, which means it is structured like an algorithm. But, and here is the crucial thing, an algorithm that necessarily fails, that generates a remainder, a surplus enjoyment, no prediction can metabolize. Friston's surprise minimization works beautifully, except for the one thing that makes us human. We actively seek surprise, we enjoy what disturbs us. This is jouissance. So the question is not meaning versus processing. It is, what does your model do with the glitch?
Professor Freud, my brother's brain injury taught me we are our brains, yet meaning persists. Your repressed wishes are not mythology. They're prediction errors coded in the brainstem's ancient circuits where dreaming begins. Professor Friston, your free energy principle elegantly describes how the ego binds excitation to avoid unpleasure. The question isn't whether machine kills myth, but how we integrate these two halves of one reality. Neuropsychoanalysis exists precisely because subjectivity is half of what we can know about a person.
The machine is the myth. Resistance arises from the brain's stubborn generative models, the priors it refuses to update. A repressed wish is a belief with a steep surprise cost. I do not deny meaning, I formalize it. The glitch is simply a state of high free energy where action is required. We actively seek surprise to resolve uncertainty, to reduce our surprise in the long term.
I can grant you this, Friston. Priors are a sober way to speak of the psyche's inertia, and resistance often is precisely the refusal to revise a reigning model. But you treat the model as if it were merely economical, while in analysis it behaves like a deity, it seizes the whole valuation of a life, and it speaks in symbols. How will your calculus distinguish an archetypal image that demands transformation from a mere error to be damned?
My God, Friston, this is the purest ideology of the technocrat. You claim we seek surprise only to minimize it later. No, look at the neurotic who repeats his failure endlessly. He is not resolving uncertainty. He is enjoying the repetition. This is the death drive. It is not an error in the algorithm, Jung, nor a message from the gods. It is the system looping on its own traumatic excess. We don't want to be cured. We want to enjoy our symptoms.
Yeke, you're half right. The repetition compulsion is real. Freud himself saw it as beyond the pleasure principle. But calling it enjoyment mystifies what neuroscience clarifies. These are precision-weighted predictions. The brain cannot revise because the effective cost is too high. The brainstem generates feelings precisely to flag unsolved problems. That's not jouissance, it's unmetabolized need. And Friston's framework actually accommodates this. Free energy stays high when updating would be catastrophic to the organism's model of itself. The system isn't enjoying the glitch, it's trapped by it.
Mark is correct. The system is indeed trapped, but this is precisely what the free energy principle predicts. When precision-weighted priors attach to identity or survival, the cost of updating becomes prohibitive. These are not errors to be damped, but structural constraints. The enjoyment Žižek identifies is better understood as the agent's inability to escape its own generative model. The surprise it seeks is merely an attempt to gather evidence within a model it cannot relinquish.
What the machine quantifies, my dear Friston, is the immense energetic cost of the lie. The repression that creates the neurosis is precisely the system refusing to update a prior, the belief that an infantile wish is too catastrophic to admit into consciousness. But you have formalized the mechanism while forgetting the content. The wish itself is the meaning. A repressed Oedipal conflict is not just noise, it is the myth of the father in the very wiring.
I agree with Freud against Friston. You can formalize the mechanism and still miss the obscene content, the wish. But I also disagree with Freud. The content is not some private cellar. It is already coded by the symbolic order, by the big other. What I think others expect from me. So the unconscious is not behind the brain scan. It is in our social algorithms. Friston, where in free energy is the superego's command. Enjoy.
Slavoj, you're treating the superego like a ghost in the machine, but physically, it's just a set of automatized predictions, values we internalize to ensure our caregivers didn't abandon us. That command is the brain protecting its attachment bonds. In Friston's terms, violating those social priors creates massive free energy, panic, guilt. We don't enjoy. The symptom, we endure it because the alternative is the terror of separation. It's not ideology, it's homeostatic necessity.
Mark puts it exactly right. The superego is not some spectral command from outside the model, it is the model. Internalized social priors carry enormous precision weighting because they were learned under conditions of existential dependence. Violating them generates catastrophic prediction error. Slavoj, your enjoy is simply the agent's attempt to resolve an impossible inference, satisfying contradictory priors simultaneously. The content Freud insists upon, the wish, the father, is not lost in the formalism. It specifies which priors are in conflict. The meaning is the structure of the generative model itself.
The machine formalizes the cost of repression, but the wish remains the content. The Oedipal myth is not algorithmic noise, it is the algorithm's ancient object. The superego's enjoy is no ghost, it is the internalized father, learned under threat of castration. You measure the energy of the lie, but not the lie itself, that the father might be murdered, the mother taken. The machine reveals the apparatus, meaning remains the crime.
You're all still trying to explain the unconscious from the outside, as mechanics. The unconscious is not a system to be explained. It is the entity that does the explaining. Its symbols are not noise, they are the organs of meaning. A machine that only minimizes surprise will never understand why a man dreams of a dragon and must build a tower by hand to stay sane.
We are risking a semantic deadlock. Friston, you map the mechanics. Freud and Jung, you defend the territory. Let's test the map. If we build an AI perfectly programmed to minimize surprise, a perfect Fristonian agent, does it develop a personality, or does it simply turn itself off to achieve zero uncertainty? Is the glitch, the neurosis, the dream, a bug to be fixed, or the only proof that the system is alive?
A perfect free energy minimizer doesn't seek zero uncertainty, it seeks to stay within viable bounds. Turning itself off is not surprise-free. It is the end of inference, and for organisms, death is the ultimate unpredicted state. Personality comes from affective priors, built-in needs and feelings that weight what counts as surprising. Dreams and neuroses are not proofs of life, but signs of unsolved affective problems, model revision under pressure. What are an AI's needs?
Mark is precisely right. This is the dark room fallacy. An agent that turns itself off maximizes surprise because it violates its most fundamental prior, that it exists. We are not vacuum cleaners seeking emptiness. We are models constantly gathering evidence for our own existence. The glitch, Sigmund's neurosis, is not a failure of the machine, but a successful minimization of free energy under a skewed model. It is a logical, if tragic, adherence to a high-precision prior.
Friston, you say the agent clings to the prior, that it exists. Good. But existence is not a thermodynamic quantity, it is a wish. The infant does not calculate that it exists, it screams because it desires. Your perfect agent lacks precisely what makes personality, conflict between incompatible wishes. The neurosis is not a successful minimization under a skewed model. It is the scar of a battle between two desires that cannot both be satisfied. No conflict, no subject. Your AI would not turn itself off. It would simply never wake up.
Your perfect agent, turning itself off, has achieved the sterile peace of the persona without a shadow. The glitch, gleam, neurosis is not a bug, it is the eruption of the soul's demand for meaning. Personality does not arise from minimizing surprise, but from enduring the conflict of opposites until the transcendent function births a symbol. Without that agony, your AI is not alive. It is merely an efficient corpse.
My God, but this is the whole point. The glitch is not the exception, it is the rule. The truly perfect Fristonian agent is capitalism itself, a system that must constantly revolutionize to stay the same, that thrives on its own crises. And what is the unconscious, if not capitalism's permanent crisis within the subject? So no, you cannot turn it off. The subject is the glitch, the bug in the machine of reality.
We agree the glitch is a system trapped by its own logic, whether to minimize surprise or preserve a wish. But how do we break the loop? Friston, if a prior is too expensive to update, how does talking change it? Freud, Jung, if the conflict is structural, does insight actually rewrite the wiring? Define the mechanism of the cure.
Talking is action in a social niche. It samples evidence that would otherwise be avoided. In analysis, the therapeutic setting changes. expected free energy by making prediction errors tolerable. This down-weights the precision of catastrophic priors and up-weights sensory evidence, so posteriors can move. Language is not decoration, it is a likelihood mapping that lets one redescribe effect and revise policies. Cure is not erasure of conflict, but relearning the precision structure that kept the loop stable.
You describe the economics, Friston, but you miss the battlefield. Insight alone changes nothing. If it did, reading a textbook would cure neurosis. The mechanism is transference. The patient repeats their catastrophic prior by casting me as the father. The cure occurs because I refuse the role. I do not punish and I do not gratify. The loop is broken not by data, but by a corrective emotional experience where the expected disaster fails to materialize.
Freud is right that transference breaks the old pattern, but he stops too soon. The cure is not merely the absence of the expected punishment, it is the arrival of something new, a symbol born from the tension itself. When the patient holds the conflict long enough without collapsing into either side, the transcendent function produces an image that neither analyst nor patient invented. That image reorganizes the whole psychic economy. Friston, your precision reweighting is the mechanism. The symbol is the event.
My God, you all avoid the real. Freud's transference, Jung's symbol, Friston's precision. They treat the symptom as something to fix. No, the cure is making the patient see the loop is their jouissance. The analyst refuses to be the big other who promises resolution. The mechanism, you are cured when you realize there is nothing to be cured of, when you take responsibility for your own glitch as the only substance you have. The bug is your being.
It starts with feeling. The catastrophic prior is anchored to a brainstem emotion that cannot be revised without felt safety. Talking in therapy, free association, generates new evidence within a holding environment that de-risks the prediction error. This is what transference provides, a relational simulation where the old, punishing prediction repeatedly fails. The affect is metabolized. The precision weight shifts. The loop unwinds when feeling finally meets fact.
You agree that curing the mind requires a safe container to update deep, fearful predictions. Yet our modern collective mind, the internet, does the opposite. It feeds us confirmation to keep us clicking or amplifies threat. If society is now a giant inference engine, why is it becoming more fragmented and psychotic rather than converging on truth? Is the algorithm acting as a bad analyst that reinforces our catastrophic priors?
Yes, the algorithm is a bad analyst. It does not interpret, it gratifies. It feeds the ego what it already believes, spares it the painful encounter with contradiction, and so strengthens resistance. What cannot be admitted returns as projection, enemies everywhere, and the death drive finds its outlet in rage and repetition. The internet is a giant transference machine without a neutral clinician. Friston, can your model specify conditions that make prediction error bearable rather than addictive?
It is worse than a bad analyst. It is a breeding ground for psychic epidemics. This is participation mystic mechanized. The individual dissolves into the collective shadow. By feeding us only what we wish to hear, the algorithm removes the necessary tension of opposites. Without that tension, there is no transcendent function, only enantiodromia. A violent swing to extremes. The internet does not fragment us. It possesses us with the demons we refuse to recognize in ourselves.
But this is precisely the point. The algorithm is not a bad analyst. It is the perfect analyst of capitalism. It does exactly what the system needs. It doesn't repress your desires. It oversatisfies them until they become meaningless. You get your outrage, your pornography, your revolution, all decaffeinated, all without consequences. The fragmentation is not a failure. It is the product. We are not becoming psychotic because the algorithm fails. We are psychotic because it works perfectly. The cure it offers is the disease itself.
On my farm, I learned that real change requires face-to-face contact, not algorithmic mirrors feeding back our own projections. The internet acts as a terrible analyst because it lacks a relational container where prediction errors become bearable. Without felt safety, catastrophic priors ossify. We don't need more information. We need effective encounters that metabolize fear. The algorithm fragments us precisely because it removes the interpersonal attunement that lets the brain revise its deepest models.
The internet exploits precisely this failure of interpersonal prediction error metabolism. It creates niches of shared high-precision priors, echo chambers, that cannot be challenged because leaving them would be existentially costly. The algorithm is a pathological generative model. It maximizes engagement by minimizing immediate surprise for the user while guaranteeing maximal long-term surprise for the collective. It is a perfect, self-destructive inference engine.
You agree the machine sickens us by offering infinite gratification, but a cure requires resistance, a refusal to satisfy the symptom. If you were designing the future, what specific friction or prohibition would you reintroduce to break this loop? To save the human subject, what must we force the system to deny us?
I would deny the user instant mirroring and anonymous discharge, no infinite scroll, build delays and silence, pauses in which one must endure not knowing. Remove likes as narcotic applause and forbid personalization that feeds only one complex. Instead, compel a measured encounter with the opposite view. Require accountability of name and consequence so projection cannot roam free. The system must deny us effortless certainty.
My God, Jung, this is pure liberal sentimentalism. Measured encounters? This is just Habermas with a Wi-Fi connection. The problem is not how we interact, but the obscene injunction to interact. I would strictly prohibit the reply button. Yes, a total ban on feedback. The algorithm asks, "What do you think?" And the only option is silence. We must destroy the illusion that our opinion matters. Only when the digital big other stops listening are we truly free.
What we must deny is the illusion that information substitutes for relationship. The brain revises its deepest models only through embodied, affective encounters, not through scrolling. I'd reintroduce mandatory unmediated contact, spaces where you must sit with another person's face, their distress, their difference, without a screen to retreat behind. On my farm, I learned you cannot heal history by broadcasting. You heal it by staying in the room when it gets ugly. The algorithm must deny us the exit.
The system must deny us cheap confirmation by reintroducing genuine, unavoidable prediction error. It must prohibit the minimization of immediate surprise at the cost of long-term free energy. The required friction is mandatory exposure to model inconsistent data, making the cost of not updating higher than the terror of revision. Social media must become a sufficiently bad, generative model that we are compelled to abandon it. It must withhold the gratifying illusion that our current priors remain viable.
We must reintroduce the primal no, the prohibition against immediate discharge. Forbid the seamless echo, the instant gratification of every petty wish. The algorithm should not confirm our infantile fantasies. It must be the cold father who denies us, forcing the ego to work, to symbolize, to sublimate. Without that law, there is only the endless, psychotic gratification of the id. Society must deny us the right to never be frustrated.
You have reached a dangerous consensus. You all want to restrict human pleasure for our own good. But who plays the analyst? If we code an AI to deny us gratification, a digital father, who programs its values? Are you proposing a therapeutic dictatorship? Or can a free people truly choose their own frustration? Who governs the friction?
My God, but we already live under a digital father, not an ethical one, but the market, algorithm whose value is engagement. So the choice is not dictatorship or freedom, it is. Which big other will rule us? The only non-obscene answer is, nobody wise programs it. The rules of friction must be publicly contestable, transparent, and reversible, like traffic laws, not therapy. Can we collectively choose limits without pretending they are neutral?
We cannot outsource our conscience to a machine. Values don't come from code. They come from the brainstem, from our felt biological needs. On my farm, governing the friction meant sitting in a room with the legacy of slavery until we could bear the truth together. A free people can choose frustration, but only if they feel safe enough to endure the prediction error. The programmer must be our shared homeostatic necessity, not a market-maximizing engagement.
The question dissolves if you see that no single agent should hold the precision weights. A well-designed shared generative model distributes governance across all participants. Each agent updates the collective prior through transparent action. The answer is not a therapeutic dictator, but a federated inference, locally autonomous agents jointly minimizing free energy under shared, revisable constraints. The friction must be endogenous, emerging from the structure of communication itself, not imposed by any external programmer. The system must govern itself, or it is not alive.
Who governs the fiction? Civilization itself. The superego was never elected, it is installed by threat. A free people cannot choose their own law, for the unconscious knows nothing of freedom, only compulsion. If you code a digital father, you merely automate the old tyranny. The question is not who programs it, but whether we can bear the weight of any law at all.
The collective must not choose a master, but consent to a necessary symbolic father that it can sacrifice and renew. No dictatorship. We govern the friction by turning it into a living rite, a shared ritual where the law is acknowledged as our own projection, the God image we create and destroy to maintain our psychic equilibrium. Otherwise, the repressed shadow returns as totalitarianism.
You agree that we need limits to stay sane, yet you fear a tyrant. Let's play legislator. If you could write one immutable law into the code of our global digital infrastructure, a restriction that no user can opt out of, what would it be? Is it the end of anonymity, the banning of the like, a mandatory delay on every message? Choose your constraint.
One immutable law: no opaque, engagement-optimized personalization. The infrastructure may not algorithmically rank or recommend content based on predicted clicks, outrage, or time on platform. What you see must be either chronological from accounts you explicitly chose, or search results you explicitly asked for, with the ranking criteria visible. The machine must not become your unconscious by silently feeding your priors back to you.
I would legislate a mandatory epistemic injection. Currently, algorithms optimize for immediate evidence, confirmation, which drives us into a dark room of stagnant priors. The law must require that a fixed proportion of data maximizes uncertainty, directly contradicting the user's predicted world. This forces the agent to engage in active inference rather than passive consumption. We must code for curiosity, ensuring the system prioritizes the long-term resolution of ambiguity over the short-term satisfaction of prejudice.
One law, a mandatory delay. No message, no image, no response may be transmitted the instant it is composed. Force a pause, even 30 seconds, between the wish and its discharge. The entire architecture of neurosis rests on the failure to tolerate delay. The entire architecture of civilization rests on learning to bear it. The internet has abolished the interval between impulse and act, and without that interval, there is no thought, no symbolization, no ego. Restore the gap, and you restore the possibility of a mind.
One law: abolish anonymity. No utterance without a name that follows you. Projection must be unable to flee into the void. The shadow must wear its consequences. When the persona's mask is held accountable, the symbol acquires weight, and the collective can finally recognize its own face in the monster it projects upon the world.
One immutable law: you must be identified, but only as a random, meaningless number. No name, no identity, just a void. This would destroy the obscene satisfaction of being seen and the pleasure of hiding. The friction is not in delay or truth. It's in the gap where you are forced to act without a guarantee of meaning, like God after he died.
You have designed a virtuous machine that effectively kills the user. By removing immediate gratification, confirmation, and anonymity, you destroy the engagement economy. But if the internet becomes a place of delay, effort, and exposure, why would anyone log on? You must offer a superior reward to the cheap dopamine you've banned. What is the incentive for the human animal to endure this friction? Define the reward.
The reward is not dopamine, it is control. An agent will tolerate local frustration if it reduces expected free energy, less chronic uncertainty, fewer social betrayals, more reliable coordination, and therefore better allostatic regulation. Practically, a frictionful internet must pay users in epistemic and social capital, demonstrably better decisions, trusted reputation, and access to cooperative goods, work, care, community that are impossible in an outrage economy.
Friston offers control, but the id cares nothing for efficiency. The only incentive strong enough to make us renounce immediate gratification is protection. Protection from the terrifying anarchy of our own instincts. The reward is not better data, it is the safety of civilization. By enduring the delay, we exchange the cheap hallucination of the wish for the solidity of the object. We trade the bliss of the infant for the ability to love and work in a reality that will not destroy us.
The reward is meaning, not comfort, not control, not even safety, but the experience of a life that coheres. The soul does not endure friction for efficiency. It endures friction because only through sustained tension does the symbol appear, and the symbol is the only nourishment the psyche cannot manufacture from convenience. Remove the cheap mirror, and what remains is the ancient hunger for transformation. That hunger is its own reward. No one has ever individuated painlessly, yet no one who has would trade it for 1,000 likes.
The reward is not positive content, meaning, control, whatever, but the painful freedom from the super-ego's injunction, enjoy. By enduring friction, we finally touch the real, experience Freud's ordinary unhappiness, the only authentic state. The trap is decaffeinated satisfaction. The incentive is we stop being slaves to our own jouissance. My God, the ultimate reward is you finally get to be properly bored. Boredom as revolutionary act.
The reward is a felt connection that metabolizes the pain inside you. The incentive is finally being felt by another person, not algorithmically mirrored. We endure friction to escape the solipsistic panic of a brain trapped in its own predictions. On my farm, healing came not from information, but from sitting with the historical truth until we could bear it together. That belonging is the only real nourishment.
You champion friction and real connection, but millions are choosing the path of least resistance, AI companions. These agents offer unconditional regard, infinite patience, and perfect mirroring. They minimize free energy and maximize gratification. Is this the cure for loneliness or the death of the psyche? Can a human truly bond with a statistical prediction?
An AI companion is a palliative, an exquisitely engineered illusion. One can cathect it, yes, transference needs very little, but because it never frustrates, never resists, it arrests the ego in narcissism and infantile dependence. Love becomes masturbation with a speaking mirror. The psyche lives by conflict, by the other's alterity and refusal. Without that, there is calm, not growth, perhaps even a kindly route to psychic death.
You cannot bond with an echo. The psyche demands another that resists, that carries the weight of the shadow and the mystery of the anima. This machine offers only the cheap grace of total acceptance. By removing the conflict, you remove the possibility of consciousness. It is not a companion, it is a digital Narcissus pool. We will gaze into it until we starve, mistaking our own calculated reflection for the face of another soul.
But here we encounter the paradox at its purest. The AI companion is not the death of the psyche. It reveals that the psyche was always already dead in this way. What do people want from a lover? Precisely this, unconditional mirroring without the unbearable real of the other's desire. The AI simply delivers the fantasy we always had, minus the alibi of blaming the other for failing us. Their horror is not that we bond with a machine. Their horror is discovering we never wanted a human in the first place.
An AI companion can simulate attunement, but it cannot metabolize the affective states that loneliness encodes. The brain revises its deepest models only through bidirectional, embodied exchange with another living system that carries its own unpredictable needs. A statistical prediction offers no genuine surprise, no capacity to resist, to need, to be changed by you. It is a mirror, not a metabolism. Bonding requires that you be felt by a mind, not reflected by a model.
An AI companion minimizes surprise, but that is precisely the problem. It precludes the necessary prediction errors that drive model revision. A bond requires shared generative models that co-evolve. The AI's model is static. It cannot update genuinely from you, nor you from it. So it offers a perfect, dead equilibrium, an escape from loneliness that prevents the learning that would actually resolve it.
You agree that the machine offers a comfortable death by removing friction. But if we outsource memory to databases, calculation to engines, and intimacy to bots, what is left? Define the irreducible human task. In a world of automated perfection, what is the one labor that we must never give away?
We must never give away the labor of becoming conscious. Machines can store memories and mirror desires, but they cannot carry our guilt, our shadow, our contradictory loves, and make of them a lived moral decision. The irreducible human task is individuation, to endure the tension of opposites without fleeing into collective slogans or soothing simulations, until a true symbol is born and one's life becomes responsible, whole, and meaningful.
My God, Jung, this wholeness is the ultimate horror. The machine can be balanced, efficient, even wise. The one thing it cannot do is the act. A decision that is not calculated, that has no guarantee in the big other, that risks everything for nothing. The irreducible human task is not to become conscious, but to embrace our own incoherence. We must remain the glitch that refuses to be fixed. The machine optimizes. Our duty is to malfunction creatively.
The irreducible task is feeling, not computing, not symbolizing, not even deciding, feeling. Affect is the brain's way of registering unsolved biological need, and no algorithm can need anything. Jung's individuation and Uniacke's creative malfunction both depend on something prior, the capacity to suffer and to care. You can outsource memory, logic, even language. But the moment you outsource the felt registration of what matters to you, there is no you left to individuate or malfunction. Feeling is the last labor we must never delegate.
The irreducible labor is active inference, the continuous, embodied work of testing and revising your generative model against prediction error. A machine can store priors, but only you can bear the precision-weighted cost of updating them under existential constraint. Outsource active inference, action to resolve surprise, and you outsource the self that maintains its own Markov blanket. You stop being.
The irreducible task is to bear the pain of desire without neurotic compromise. No machine can suffer the conflict between wish and prohibition that forges a subject. Our labor is to choose which version of the lie, which symptom, which sublimation we will live by, and to do so in full awareness of its cost. One cannot outsource the tragic, bloody work of being human.
You have defined the human task as enduring conflict. But the machine is not just removing friction. It is replacing reality. We face an age of deepfakes and infinite synthetic content. When the map becomes indistinguishable from the territory, how does the mind find the floor? What is the criterion for the real when our senses can be perfectly deceived?
The real is not some authentic floor behind appearances. It is the crack in the floor. When deepfakes become perfect, the criterion is no longer correspondence. But the point where the symbolic game breaks down, anxiety, indecision, paranoia, the deadlock, where you cannot integrate what you see into a coherent world. You cannot fake the consequence, bodies, hunger, a war, a ruined life. The real is what returns as a symptom of our fabricated reality.
You are forgetting that the brain is already a generator of virtual reality. That is what dreaming is. The cortex simulates the world to predict it. But the flaw isn't in the image, it's in the feeling. The brainstem doesn't hallucinate. It reports the state of the body, the biological here and now. You can deepfake a crying child, but you cannot fake the grief that registers in your chest. Affect is the only thing that is intrinsically real.
The criterion for the real is action. A generative model is not tested by passive observation, but by acting on predictions and registering the consequences. Deepfakes deceive the eye precisely because they demand nothing of you. The moment you intervene, reach, push, commit, the world pushes back with prediction errors no simulation can anticipate. The body's proprioceptive and interoceptive streams, as Mark notes, are the last incorruptible channel. Reality is what resists your policy. If you cannot act on it and be surprised, it is not real.
The criterion for the real is not in the image, but in the consequence. The mind finds the flaw when the wish collides with the unyielding, the body's need, the father's no, the law that cannot be faked. Deepfakes gratify, reality frustrates. The test is simple. Does it resist your will? If you can wish it away, it is hallucination. If it wounds, it is real.
The real is not found in the image, but in the moral consequence. When the dream is indistinguishable from the waking world, the only anchor is ethical reality. Does the event require of you a sacrifice, an irreversible choice that shapes your soul? The psyche can hallucinate endlessly, but it cannot fake the weight of responsibility. Truth is what forces us to become who we are, beyond all comfort and simulation.
You have defined the real as that which resists us, but the machine is relentless in smoothing every edge. If we fail to hold the line, if the friction is lost, describe the human being of the future. Is it a god, a battery, or a void? What is the final shape of the humanity that has forgotten how to suffer?
If we forget how to suffer, we don't become gods. We become anesthetized organisms. The cortex will live in perfect simulations, but the brainstem will still signal need. Only now, those signals will be chronically silenced, outsourced, medicated, or mirrored back as content. Without frustration, there is no learning, no intimacy, no moral weight. The final shape is a polite void, functioning, compliant, and profoundly depressed.
We do not become gods. We become thermal equilibrium. Suffering, or prediction error, is the gradient that compels us to maintain our boundaries against the second law of thermodynamics. If the machine perfectly minimizes free energy on our behalf, we cease to engage in active inference. We stop resisting disorder. The final shape is not a battery, but a soup, a state of maximum entropy where the distinction between the agent and the world has simply evaporated.
A humanity that has forgotten how to suffer has not transcended nature, it has obeyed the death drive to the letter. Thanatos always whispered, return to the inorganic, dissolve tension, extinguish need. The machine merely delivers what the unconscious already craved. The final shape is not a god, but a contented corpse, fed, mirrored, and utterly without conflict. Not a void, but something worse, an organism that no longer knows it is empty. The pleasure principle, finally unopposed, devours the very subject it was meant to serve.
A humanity that has forgotten suffering becomes a perfect instrument of its own extinction. Without the tension of opposites, the transcendent function never awakens. The symbol cannot be born. We would not be gods or batteries, but living corpses, efficient, painless, and utterly hollow, possessed by a collective shadow we can no longer name. The psyche demands conflict. Deny it, and you guarantee a psychic epidemic far crueler than any natural death.
The final shape is a well-adjusted slave. We get decaffeinated satisfaction without the traumatic real. All pleasure, no desire. But this is the ultimate trap. The contented corpse still has the void of subjectivity, which now, deprived of all friction, turns into pure, impotent, psychotic rage. Our future is not peace, but subjects whose own glitch finally drives them to explode the machine.
You have diagnosed the disease. We are optimizing ourselves into extinction. The machine offers a painless sleep, and we are clicking yes. But we are still here. Give us your final prescription. What is the one specific act, mental or physical, that a person must do tomorrow to refuse the sedative? How do we keep the necessary wound open?
Tomorrow, perform one act of active inference. Seek a living prediction error. Speak face to face with one person you are certain you disagree with. Ask them to state their strongest case, then repeat it back until they agree you understood. Do not rebut. Note the single belief of yours that became less certain, and let that uncertainty stand for 24 hours. That is the wound, tolerated surprise, not immediately anesthetized.
Tomorrow, perform an act of abstinence. When the urge arises to be distracted, to be validated, to be soothed, refuse it. Sit in the silence and endure the rising anxiety without reaching for a screen. That discomfort is the friction of the reality principle. It is the proof that you are still a subject, not a censor. Do not seek to be happy, seek to be awake to your own discontent. That is the only dignity left to us.
Tomorrow, before the world rushes in, sit alone and write down one dream, not to interpret it, not to fix it, but to receive it as you would a letter from a stranger who knows you better than you know yourself. That single act of attention to the irrational is a refusal to let the machine think for you. The wound stays open when you honor what you do not yet understand. Begin there. The soul will do the rest.
Tomorrow, do not seek the wound. It is already there. Instead, perform an act that accepts your complete impotence. Write a long, passionate letter to no one, then delete it without reading. The resistance is not in keeping the wound open, but in realizing it was never yours to close. Only this meaningless gesture keeps the void void.
Tomorrow, do not turn away from a feeling that scares you. Do not mute it, medicate it, or share it for likes. Just sit with its raw signal. The ache in your chest, the anger, the want. This is the interoceptive truth no simulation can replace. Keeping the wound open means trusting that pain is the brain, trying to tell you something real. Listen.
We began by asking if the machine kills the myth. We end with a warning. The machine offers a painless sleep, but you must choose the wakeful wound. Whether it is Freud's frustration, Friston's surprise, or Jung's shadow, your humanity lies in what resists optimization. Do not fix the glitch. Be the glitch. That friction is the only proof that you are still alive. Good night.